July 3. 350 new men from West Virginia were turned into this summer resort this morning. They brought good news as to successful termination of the war, and they also caused war after coming among us. As usual, the raiders proceeded to rob them of their valuables, and a fight occurred in which hundreds were engaged.
This state of things had become unendurable. Sergeant Leroy L. Key of Company M, our battalion, resolved to make an effort to crush the raiders. He was a printer from Bloomington, Illinois, tall, dark, intelligent, and strong-willed, and one of the bravest men I ever knew. He was ably seconded by Limber Jim of the 67th Illinois, whose lithe, sinewy form and striking features reminded one of a young Sioux brave. He had all of Key's desperate courage, but not his brains or his talent for leadership.
Hey, fresh fish. Welcome to Andersonville. Fine looking place, don't you think? We're just good catch then, Virginia. That's good. Means Grant's going forward, Bobby Lee's going back. Just the way we like it. Let me show you around, get you a good place to stay. You want to be up near the wall, away from the swamp. Don't stink so bad there. Ain't so many bugs either. Come on, you hungry? I'll get you something to eat. What happened to you? We'll take care of it. Come on. Like people up here. Come on.
Look at these vultures. Just waiting to rob and murder the new boys. Look at them. Be these stinking cowards.
Jim, there's 1,000 of them. Come on.
They have clubs and knives. We have nothing.
Who's with me? Who? Who's with me? Who? Who's with me? I'm with you, Jim. We're with you. We're with you. You want him? Then let's get him! By God, I'm with you. Where are you standing there? Come on, man. We're with you. I wait for this day.
Come on. Come on.
You slime swimming pig. Come on.
Were made to Captain Wirtz that this thing would be tolerated no longer, that these raiders must be put down, or the men would rise in their might and break away, if assistance was not given with which to preserve order.
He informed Wirtz what he proposed doing, so that any unusual commotion within the prison might not be mistaken for an attempt upon the stockade, and made the excuse for opening with the artillery. Wirtz, who happened to be in a complacent humor, approved of the design and allowed him the use of the enclosure of the north gate to confine his prisoners in. In the southwest corner of the stockade, where I was, we formed ourselves into a company of 50 active boys, mostly belonging to my own battalion and to other Illinois regiments, of which I was elected captain. My first lieutenant was a tall, taciturn, long-armed member of the 111th Illinois, whom we called Egypt, as he came from that section of the state. He was wonderfully handy with his fists. I think you could knock a fellow down so he would fall harder and lie longer than any person I ever saw. We made a tacit division of duties. I did the talking, and Egypt went through the manual labor of knocking our opponents down. In the numerous little encounters in which our company was engaged, Egypt would stand by my side, silent, grim, and patient, while I pursued the dialogue and the leader of the other crowd. As soon as he thought the conversation had reached the proper point, his long left arm stretched out like a flash, and the other fellow dropped as if he had suddenly come in range of a mule that was feeling well. That unexpected left-hander never failed. It would have made Charles Reade's heart leap for joy to see it. In spite of Key's efforts at secrecy, information as to a scheme reached the raiders. It was debated at their headquarters and decided that Key must be killed. 3 men were selected to do this work. They called on Key at dusk on the evening of the 2nd of July. In response to their inquiries, he came out of the blanket-covered hole on the hillside that he called his tent. They told him what they had heard and asked if it was true. He said it was. One of them then drew a knife and the other 2 billies to attack him. But anticipating trouble, he had procured a revolver which one of the pilgrims had brought in his knapsack, and drawing this, he drove them off, but without firing a shot. The occurrence caused the greatest excitement. To us of the regulators, it showed that the raiders had penetrated our designs and were prepared for them. Morning at last came. Our companies mustered on their grounds and then marched to the space on the south side where the rations were issued. Each man was armed with a small club secured to his wrist by a string. The rebels, with their chronic fear of an outbreak animating them, had all the infantry in line of battle with loaded guns. The cannon and the works were shotted, the fuses thrust into the touch holes, and the men stood with lanyards in hand ready to mow down everybody at any instant. The sun rose rapidly through the clear sky, which soon glowed down on us like a brazen oven. The whole camp gathered where it could best view the encounter. This was upon the north side. As I have before explained, the 2 sides sloped toward each other like those of a great trough. The raiders' headquarters stood upon the center of the southern slope, and consequently, those standing on the northern slope saw everything as if upon a stage of a theater. While standing in ranks waiting the orders to move, one of my comrades touched me on the arm and said, "My God, just look over there. I turned from watching the rebel artillerists, whose intentions gave me more uneasiness than anything else, and looked in the direction indicated by the speaker. The sight was the strangest one my eyes ever encountered. There were at least 15,000, perhaps 20,000 men packed together on the bank, and every eye was turned on us. The slope was such that each man's face showed over the shoulders of the one in front of him, making acres on acres of faces. It was as if the whole broad hillside was paved or thatched with human countenances. When all was ready, we moved down upon the big tent, in as good order as we could preserve while passing through the narrow, tortuous paths between the tents. Key, Limber Jim, Ned Kerrigan, Goody, Tom Larkin, and Ned Johnson led the advance with their companies. The prison was as silent as a graveyard. As we approached, the raiders massed themselves in a strong, heavy line with a center against which our advance was moving, held by the most redoubtable of their leaders. How many there were of them could not be told, as it was impossible to say where their line ended and the mass of spectators began. They could not themselves tell, as the attitude of a large portion of the spectators would be determined by which way the battle went. Not a blow was struck until the lines came close together. Then the raider center launched itself forward against ours and grappled savagely with the leading regulators. For an instant, it seemed an hour, the struggle was desperate. Strong, fierce men clenched and strove to throttle each other. Great muscles strained almost to bursting, and blows with fist and club, dealt with all the energy of mortal hate, fell like hail. 1, perhaps 2 endless minutes, the line surged, throbbed backward and forward a step or two, and then, as if by a concentration of mighty effort, our men flung the raider line back from it, broken, shattered. The next instant, our leaders were striding through the mass like raging lions. Kerrigan, Limber Jim, Larkin, Johnson, and Goody each smote down a swath of men before them as they moved restlessly forward. We lightweights had been sent around on the flanks to separate the spectators from the combatants, strike the raiders in reveres, and, as far as possible, keep the crowd from reinforcing them. In 5 minutes after the first blow was struck, the overthrow of the raiders was complete. Resistance ceased, and they sought safety in flight. As the result became apparent to the watchers on the opposite hillside, they vented their pent-up excitement in a yell that made the very ground tremble, and we answered them with a shout that expressed not only our exultation over our victory, but our great relief from the intense strain we had long borne. We picked up a few prisoners on the battlefield and retired without making any special effort to get any more then, as we knew that they could not escape us. The raiders' tents were torn down and pillaged. Blankets, tent poles, and cooking utensils were carried off as spoils, and the ground was dug over for secreted property. A large quantity of watches, chains, knives, rings, gold pens, etc., the booty of many a raid, was found and helped to give impetus to the hunt. Even the rebel quartermaster, with a characteristic keen scent of the rebels for spoils, smelled from the outside the opportunity for gaining plunder, and came in with a squad of rebels equipped with spades to dig for buried treasures. How successful he was, I know not, as I took no part in any of the operations of that nature. It was claimed that several skeletons of victims of the raiders were found buried beneath the tent. I cannot speak with any certainty as to this, though my impression is that at least one was found.
As I write, this middle of the afternoon, the battle rages. The police go right to raider headquarters, knock right and left, and make their arrests. Sometimes the police are whipped and have to retreat, but they rally their forces and again make a charge in which they are successful. Can lay in our shade and see the trouble go on. Must be killing some by the shouting. The raiders fought for their very life and are only taken after being thoroughly whipped.
Myself and Egypt, my taciturn lieutenant of the sinewy left arm, were sent with our company to arrest Pete Donnelly, a notorious character and leader of a bad crowd. He was more knocker than raider, however. He was an old Pemberton building acquaintance, and as we marched up to where he was standing at the head of his gathering clan, he recognized me and said, "Hello, Illinois," the name by which I was generally known in prison. "What do you want here?" I replied, "Pete, Key has sent me for you. I want you to go to headquarters." "What does Key want with me?" "I don't know, I'm sure. He only said to bring you. But I haven't had anything to do with them other snoozers you have been having trouble with. I don't know anything about that. You can talk to Key as to that. I only know that we are sent for you. Well, you don't think you can take me unless I choose to go. You ain't got anybody in that crowd big enough to make it worthwhile for him to waste his time trying it. I replied diffidently that one never knew what he could do till he tried, that while none of us was very big, we were willing a lot of the little fellows as he ever saw, and if it were all the same to him, we would undertake to waste a little time getting him to headquarters. The conversation seemed unnecessarily long to Egypt, who stood by my side about a half step in advance. Pete was becoming angrier and more defiant every minute. His followers were crowding up to us, club in hand. Finally, Pete thrust his fist in my face and roared out, "Boy, I ain't a-going with ye, and you can't take me, you... This was Egypt's cue. His long left arm uncoupled like the loosening of a weight of a pile driver. It caught Mr. Donnelly under the chin, fairly lifted him from his feet, and dropped him on his back among his followers. It seemed to me that the predominating expression in his face as he went over was that of profound wonder as to where that blow could have come from, and why he did not see it in time to dodge or ward it off. As Pete dropped, the rest of us stepped forward with our clubs to engage his followers, while Egypt and one or two others tied his hands and otherwise secured him. But his henchmen made no effort to rescue him, and we carried him over to headquarters without molestation. The work of arresting increased in interest and excitement until it developed into a furor of a hunt, with thousands eagerly engaged in it.
Other arrests are being made today, and occasionally a big fight. Little Terry, whom they could not find yesterday, was taken today. Had been hiding in an old well or hole in the ground. Fought like a little tiger, but had to go. Limber Jim is a brick, and should be made a major general if he ever reaches our lines.
By evening, Key had perhaps 125 of the most noted raiders in his hands. Words had allowed him the use of a small stockade forming the entrance to the north gate to confine the men. The next thing was the judgment and punishment of the arrested ones.
How would this trial be conducted?
According to the rule of law, Captain, both sides would have lawyers to speak for them. The raiders would be allowed to speak for themselves, question the witnesses provide.
You would have a jury?
Yes, sir. New men who come in after today so they wouldn't be prejudiced against the defendants.
Never in my life heard of anything like this. These men, these raiders, they are as bad as they say.
Animals, Captain. Cutthroats and murderers. Even as Yankees go, these are the worst of the worst.
If I allow this, it will make your task easier, keeping order in the stockade.
Might just do that, sir. They're real troublemakers.
I've seen you before, haven't I?
I was one of the men caught escaping. You had me in the stocks for a week.
Ah. And you won't make that mistake again, will you? As a lawbreaker, you agree with this?
Yes, I do, Captain.
I will get you the law books. Keep the proceedings in writing. You will send the findings and the sentences to me, and if everything is in order, the sentence will be ordered for execution. Keep the ringleaders under lock and key until they ask for them.